10 countries where Americans are unwelcome in 2024. When traveling abroad, most Americans expect to be welcomed with open arms. After all, the U.S. has a significant global presence, and many countries host millions of American tourists annually. However, there are regions where American visitors are far from popular due to historical tensions, political conflicts, or simple cultural differences. In this video, we're diving into the 10 countries where Americans should proceed with caution or avoid altogether. Let's begin with one of the most off-limits places for U.S. citizens in recent years. 10. Myanmar, also known as Burma, has a population just shy of 55 million. While the country boasts a rich cultural history, its political climate in recent years has made it a difficult place for American tourists to visit. Since the military coup of 2021, Myanmar has descended into instability, marked by civil unrest, ongoing conflicts, and significant restrictions on human rights. For Americans, visiting Myanmar means navigating a complex web of sanctions, a lengthy visa process, and a country rife with political turmoil. The U.S. government currently advises against travel due to the volatile situation on the ground. Moreover, Myanmar's strained relationship with the U.S. government makes American tourists highly unwelcome, especially considering the ongoing sanctions. Many travelers are discouraged from even trying to visit as the risks far outweigh the rewards. 9. Yemen. With a population of approximately 30 million, Yemen has been embroiled in a civil war since 2015. This prolonged conflict has created one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern history, where millions have been displaced and basic services are scarce. For Americans, Yemen is considered one of the most dangerous destinations in the world. The U.S. government has issued a stern warning against traveling to Yemen, citing ongoing violence, terrorism, and the high likelihood of kidnapping. Furthermore, Americans are viewed with suspicion due to the perceived U.S. involvement in the region's conflicts, making it a hostile environment for tourists. Even obtaining a visa to visit Yemen is an uphill battle, with stringent processes that make travel nearly impossible. 8. Somalia, home to around 15 million people, has faced significant political instability for decades. The country has been ravaged by conflict, piracy, and terrorist insurgencies, with groups like Al-Shabaab posing a constant threat to both locals and foreign nationals. In 2022, President Joe Biden approved the redeployment of U.S. forces to combat these insurgents, making it clear that the U.S. is heavily involved in Somalia's internal security situation. For Americans, entering Somalia is a risk-filled endeavor. The visa process is notoriously difficult, and once you're in, the security risks are daunting. The constant threat of kidnapping and violence is enough to make any potential traveler think twice. Additionally, with millions displaced and living in dire conditions, it's not exactly a tourist-friendly atmosphere. 7. Venezuela, a country with a population of over 28 million, has long been a destination of interest for many travelers seeking to explore its diverse landscapes and rich culture. However, recent political instability, economic decline, and international sanctions have made it increasingly difficult for Americans to visit. In recent years, Venezuela's economic crisis has reached alarming levels. Hyperinflation, food shortages, and widespread poverty have driven millions of citizens to seek refuge abroad, with over 7.7 million people having fled the country by 2023. For those who still wish to visit Venezuela, the process is daunting. U.S. citizens face numerous bureaucratic challenges when attempting to obtain a visa, and even once inside, they are confronted with the harsh realities of the country's deep economic issues. Additionally, tensions between Venezuela and the U.S. government make Americans less than welcome. The complex political situation, marked by years of diplomatic disputes and sanctions, has fostered a climate of suspicion towards Americans. For visitors, this creates an uncomfortable atmosphere, with the risk of encountering hostility or even becoming targets of crime due to the country's lawlessness. 6. Libya. Libya, with a population of about 7 million, presents another challenging destination for Americans, largely due to its long-standing internal conflict and volatile security situation. The U.S. government currently advises against travel to Libya due to the persistent threats posed by armed militias, terrorism, and criminal activity. Libya's relationship with the United States has been tense for decades, especially following the 2012 attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi, which resulted in the deaths of U.S. diplomats. This tragic event marked a major turning point in the diplomatic relationship between the two nations, leading to heightened security measures and increased restrictions on American visitors. Securing a visa to visit Libya is incredibly difficult, and once there, American travelers are faced with numerous risks. Local lawlessness and ongoing armed conflicts can make the experience of visiting Libya dangerous for any foreigner, let alone an American. The U.S. also imposes sanctions on the Libyan government, which adds another layer of complexity for those hoping to visit. Visitors should be prepared for a grim reality where safety and security are far from guaranteed. 5. Syria, with its population of around 17 million, has been in a state of war for more than a decade, with the country devastated by a brutal civil war that has drawn in global powers. For Americans, Syria is a no-go zone. And for good reason. The U.S. government has placed Syria on its do not travel list, citing the extreme dangers posed by ongoing armed conflict, terrorism, and civil unrest. The geopolitical situation in Syria is highly complex, with the U.S. being directly involved in military operations aimed at combating extremist groups like ISIS. This has further strained relations between the U.S. and the Syrian government, making American visitors highly unwelcome. The visa process for Americans wishing to enter Syria is a maze of bureaucratic hurdles, and many travelers are denied entry due to the tense diplomatic standoff. Even if one somehow manages to get a visa and enter Syria, the security risks are overwhelming. The presence of various militant groups, the threat of kidnapping, and the ever-present possibility of being caught in crossfire make Syria a dangerous place for any foreign national, especially Americans, who are viewed with suspicion due to their government's involvement in the region. 4. Afghanistan, with a population of approximately 38 million, has long been a focal point of geopolitical conflict. Since the U.S. withdrawal in 2021 and the return of the Taliban to power, the security situation in Afghanistan has drastically deteriorated. For Americans, visiting Afghanistan is a daunting prospect, one that comes with substantial risks. The U.S. State Department has issued a firm warning against traveling to Afghanistan due to the ongoing threat of terrorism, violence, and kidnapping. Terrorist groups like the Taliban and ISIS-K continue to operate within the country, making it one of the most dangerous places in the world for foreign nationals, particularly Americans. While the Taliban government may not pose as much of an immediate threat to American citizens in the way that extremist groups do, their strained relationship with the U.S. makes American visitors unwelcome. Obtaining a visa for Afghanistan is a rigorous process, with several additional security checks and hurdles for American travelers. Even those who manage to secure entry face the risk of being caught in the chaos of the conflict, as well as the very real danger of being targeted for kidnapping or even execution by groups that see Americans as enemies. 3. Iraq, with a population nearing 40 million, is another country where Americans are not particularly welcomed. The country's history with the U.S. is complicated, to say the least, largely due to the 2003 U.S.-led invasion and the subsequent Iraq War. While the security situation in Iraq has improved in recent years, tensions between Iraq and the U.S. persist, especially in the aftermath of the war and ongoing conflicts with militant groups like ISIS. The visa process for Americans hoping to visit Iraq is challenging. It involves a lengthy application process, security screenings, and the need to demonstrate strong ties to the country. Even with a visa, there are significant security risks involved. Iraq remains a volatile environment, with the presence of armed militias, terrorist cells, and high levels of crime. American visitors are often seen with suspicion due to the U.S. military presence in the region, and the potential for violent encounters remains high. While Iraq is home to incredible historical sites and cultural landmarks, it is not a place where Americans can expect a warm reception. The country remains scarred by decades of conflict, and for many Iraqis, Americans are still associated with foreign occupation and military intervention. 2. Iran. Iran, with a population of about 83 million, is a country steeped in history and culture. However, the relationship between the United States and Iran has been fraught with tension since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which led to the Iran hostage crisis. This event, where 52 American diplomats were taken hostage for 444 days, created a lasting rift between the two nations. Today, that rift remains wide, and Iran continues to be a country where Americans face a hostile reception. The U.S. government advises against travel to Iran, citing risks of arbitrary arrest, terrorism, and civil unrest. One of the major challenges for American visitors is the visa process, which can take months of waiting and is often accompanied by intense scrutiny. Even after successfully obtaining a visa, Americans must be prepared for a vastly different experience from what they're used to. Restrictions on communication with locals, strict surveillance, and the potential for detention under dubious charges like espionage are all very real dangers for Americans in Iran. The country's political climate is deeply suspicious for the U.S., and the average citizen may be wary of foreigners from a country that has long been an adversary. 1. North Korea. Officially known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, is perhaps the most challenging country for Americans to visit. With a population of around 25 million, North Korea is known for its totalitarian regime, nuclear ambitions, and isolation from the rest of the world. The U.S. government has placed a blanket ban on American travel to North Korea since 2017, making it one of the few countries where U.S. citizens are not even allowed to visit under most circumstances. Even before the travel ban, North Korea was a country where Americans were not welcomed with open arms. Travelers had to go through strict government-controlled tours and were constantly accompanied by minders who ensured they followed the rules. A violation of any rules, no matter how minor, could lead to severe consequences, including detention or imprisonment. The infamous case of Otto Warmbier, an American student who was detained by North Korean authorities and later died after being released in a coma, highlights the extreme risks associated with traveling to North Korea. For those few Americans who manage to visit under special circumstances, the experience is tightly controlled. Every aspect of their visit, from the locations they can visit to the people they can speak to, is monitored by the North Korean government. This makes it one of the most repressive and dangerous destinations for American tourists.